Hello students, today we shall try to discuss and understand Module 8, Lesson 3 of subject Indian Economy. The title of Module 8, Industry. The title of Lesson 3, Industrial Policy 1991. The lesson is structured in terms of objectives, introduction, salient features of Industrial Policy 1991, appraisal of Industrial Policy 1991. The basic objective of this lesson is to understand the factors that forced the government to announce new industrial policy. Various policy measures incorporated in 1991 industrial policy, changes in MRTP Act, simplification of FERA rules, impact of industrial policy on Indian economy in terms of competition. Introduction. The wave of economic liberalization started from the mid-80s. The government started reversing its priorities slowly but steadily in the name of new economic policy. The emphasis of economic policy shifted from public to private sector. Liberalization, privatization and globalization were the order of the day all over the world. Government assigned greater importance to private sector in economic activity. Government changed the direction of its economic policy from socialistic nature to market orientation. These fundamental changes in the economic philosophy of the government over time, such as free the Indian industrial economy from rigid rules and regulations in terms of license permit Raj, integration of Indian economy with world economies, reducing the financial burden on government exchequer by privatizing loss-making public sector undertakings, relaxing the rules and regulations of Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, removing the stringent provisions in MRTP Act. The fundamental changes in economic philosophy necessitated a new industrial policy. In line with the expected changes in economic policy, government in 1991 announced new industrial policy. Prior to the announcement of new industrial policy, in the Indian industrial economy, basically there was licensing policy, and that licensing policy was somewhat like license permit Raj, in the sense for everything the industrial entrepreneurs, they have to obtain license from the government, and the sanction of licenses actually took more than the expected time. Over time, the entrepreneurs lost the zeal of establishing the industrial units, in the sense the existing industrial licensing policy prior to 1991 discouraged the entrepreneurs to establish the units. Government realized this fact and introduced the new industrial policy in terms of changing, in terms of relaxing the rigid rules and regulations that are there in the industrial licensing policy. In the sense, it actually wanted to do away with the license permit Raj. The salient features of Industrial Policy 1991. 1. Delicensing. Earlier, in the sense prior to 1991, it was mandatory for business firms to obtain prior license from the government to commence production. Delicensing does not mean removing licensing policy at all. According to this policy, for the production of 5 broad categories of commodities, prior permission is a must. These categories are: 1. Strategic items, for example, arms and ammunition. 2. Hazardous chemicals, for example, methane isocyanate, MIC. 3. Commodities that have adverse consequences on society, example, alcoholic drinks. 4. Commodities that pollute environment, example, leather products, cement, paper, sugar, automobiles. 5. Allied consumption goods, example, all electronic goods. To produce these commodities, prior permission is a must. These 5 broad categories consist of 18 commodities. The 18 industries which require license were 1. Coal and lignite. 2. Petroleum. 3. Alcoholic drinks. 4. Sugar. 5. Animal fats and oils. 6. Cigarettes. 7. Asbestos. 8. Plywood and other wood-based products. 9. Raw hides and skins. 10. Tanned or dressed for skins. 11. Motor cars. 12. Paper and newsprint. 13. Electronic, aerospace and defense equipment. 14. Industrial explosives. 15. Hazardous chemicals. 16. Drugs and pharmaceuticals. 17. Entertainment electronics. 18. White goods, namely refrigerators, washing machines, air conditioners, etc. For the production of these commodities, it is mandatory on the part of business firms to obtain proper permission to commence production. With the passage of time, most of these commodities have also been delicensed. The commodities that are outside the gambit of these 5 categories, which consists of 18 industries, prior permission is not mandatory, but they have to register themselves with the Central Industrial Secretariat if the investment in plant and machinery in such unit exceeds rupees 10 crore. So, delicensing does not mean doing away with the licensing policy. Still licensing policy is there, but for certain categories of commodities, basically in 1991 it was stated that 5 categories of items which consists of 18 commodities, if any industrialist want to produce such commodities, they have to obtain prior license from the government. Other than the commodities incorporated in this 5 broad category, they produce without taking any prior license from the government, but the thing is they have to register with the Industrial Secretariat. The second important issue in 1991 industrial policy, deregulation. This is related to the provisions of MRTP Act. MRTP stands for Monopolies Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which came into being in 1969. Its objective was to control the concentration of economic power in the hands of few big business houses in the private sector. Since then, the industrial undertakings whose capital base exceeds rupees 50 crore were subject to the provisions of MRTP Act. In 1985, under the MRTP Act, all firms with assets above 100 crore rupees were classified as MRTP firms. Such firms were permitted to enter selected industries only, and this also on a case-by-case approval basis. In addition to control through industrial licensing, separate approvals were required by such large firms for any investment proposals. The government felt that this was having adverse impact on many large firms in their plans for growth and diversification. The new industrial policy therefore scrapped the threshold limit of assets in respect of MRTP firms. These firms will now be on par with others and not require prior approval from the government for investment in the delicensed industries. The MRTP Act was accordingly amended and all unnecessary stringent provisions were removed from the MRTP Act. Now it is there without any powers, like a tiger without jaws. In its place, government brought in Competition Commission of India Act in 2002 with an objective to promote healthy competition among large business firms. So at present MRTP Act still there, but all powers, all stringent provisions of MRTP Act removed or relaxed. In place of MRTP Act, the government introduced Competition Commission of India Act in 2002. Its objective is to encourage competition among big business firms. And third important issue of 1991 industrial policy, simplification of FERA, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. The 1991 industrial policy also simplified the provisions of Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1973. Government came to the conclusion that FERA adversely affected the flow of foreign investment into Indian economy. In reality, The stringent provisions discouraged the foreign investors. Since there is immense importance for foreign investment in our economy, government replaced FERA with Foreign Exchange Management Act, that is FEMA, in 1999. Free entry to foreign direct investment and technology. It is a fact that the foreign investment has also been regulated in the Indian economy along with domestic investment. In the case of both foreign technology agreement sought by Indian firms as well as foreign investment, it was necessary to obtain prior approval from the government for each project. It was argued that this caused undue delays and also adversely affected business decision making. Therefore, the new industrial policy prepared a specified list of high technology and high investment priority industries wherein automatic permission was to be made available for direct foreign investment up to 51% foreign equity. The industries in which automatic approval was granted included a wide range of industrial activities in the capital goods and metallurgical industries, entertainment electronics, food processing and service sector units having significant export potential. The limit was subsequently raised from 51% to 74% and then to 100% for many of these industries. Foreign direct investment is prohibited in atomic energy, lottery business, gambling and betting. In September 2012, foreign direct investment is allowed in retail business also. The role of public sector as per the provisions of 1991 industrial policy. The industrial policy announced in 1956 had given priority to public sector in economic activity. Accordingly, 17 industries were classified as state monopolies. In line with the new economic policy, in 1991 industrial policy, the number of industries under the category of state monopolies was reduced to 8. These were 1. Arms and ammunition, 2. Atomic energy, 3. Coal and lignite, 4. Mineral oils, 5. Mining of iron ore, manganese ore, chrome, gypsum, sulfur, gold and diamond, 6. Mining of copper, lead, zinc, tin, 7. Minerals used in atomic energy, 8. Rail transport. These were the areas of public sector as per the provisions of 1991 industrial policy, but now only 3 industries specifically reserved for public sector. These are atomic energy production, minerals used in atomic energy and rail transport. The new industrial policy also stated that the government will undertake the review of existing public sector units in low technology, small scale and strategic areas. It was stated that the SIC units will be referred to Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, that is BIFR, for examining their viability status. For the enterprises remaining in the public sector, it was stated that they will be provided a much greater degree of management autonomy through the system of MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. The government has also announced its intention to offer a part of government shareholding in the public sector enterprises to mutual funds, financial institutions, general public and the workers. Government initiated measures to privatize loss-making public sector undertakings through its disinvestment policy. To disinvest public undertakings, government appointed disinvestment committee under the chairmanship of Dr. C. Rangarajan. This committee suggested modalities to disinvest public sector units. The industrial location policy. According to the new policy, the proposed industries in cities where population is less than 1 million does not require any permission from the government except for industries subject to compulsory licensing. In cities of more than 1 million population, the industries other than those of non-polluting in nature could be established 25 kilometers outside its periphery. However, notified industries of non-polluting nature such as electronics, computer software and printing may be located 25 kilometers off the periphery of cities with more than 1 million population. It was explicitly stated that zoning and land use regulations as well as environment legislation continue to regulate industrial locations. Important aspect of 1991 industrial policy related to trade sector reforms. Government introduced reforms in foreign trade sector. As part of trade sector reforms and to boost exports, liberalized exchange rate management system LERMS, LERMS was introduced in 1993. Many items which were placed earlier under restricted or banned list now incorporated under open general list OGL. With respect to large number of items, tariffs reduced to minimum level. Government announced many incentives for export sector, and now quantitative restrictions were completely abolished. Under the trade sector reforms, to boost the exports, to induce the exporters, the government introduced liberalized exchange rate management system in 1993, and further the government tried to reduce the rate of tariff to a minimum level, and at the same time earlier the government used tariffs and also quantitative restrictions to restrict the entry of foreign goods into the Indian market. But as part of WTO agreement, World Trade Organization agreement, now the Indian government totally abolished the quantitative restrictions. Only now it depends on tariffs to restrict the entry of foreign commodities into the Indian market. Monetary and fiscal sector reforms. Here monetary sector is basically related to money supply and the rate of interest, whereas fiscal policy is basically related to public expenditure, that is the government expenditure, government borrowing and the government revenue. So the government initiated large number of measures bring in reforms in monetary sector and also the fiscal sector. As part of new economic policy, government initiated many measures to bring in reforms in monetary and fiscal policies. And removal of mandatory convertibility clause. The industrial undertakings in India generally borrow funds from public sector financial institutions. Financial institutions earlier had incorporated a mandatory rule of converting loans into equity. This rule was considered as a threat to the existence of private enterprises. The new industrial policy removed this clause to give new lease of life to private enterprises. Appraisal of industrial policy 1991. The changes in industrial policy certainly help to improve efficiency by reducing the time and cost of projects. The changes in respect of foreign investment and foreign technology agreements designed in such a way to attract foreign capital, technology, managerial expertise from abroad. The changes with respect to public sector will enhance the allocative efficiency. Opening up of the areas so far reserved for public sector implies an opening for the sector which has by and large given a better account of itself. The measures such as formulation and implementation of memorandum of understanding and its monitoring, greater autonomy may be expected to improve the performance of the enterprises that will remain in the public sector. Greater emphasis in controlling and regulating monopolistic, restrictive and unfair trade practices will curb anti-competitive behavior of firms and thus promote competition and efficiency. But at the same time, the new industrial policy laid foundations for unwanted consequences in Indian economy. These unwanted consequences as a result of by implementing the provisions of 1991 industrial policy. It is erratic and fluctuating industrial growth. It was expected that the competitive environment created through implementing new industrial policy induced higher growth rate in the industrial sector. In fact, the rate of growth in the industrial sector declined in the post-reform period, that is after 1991. The period of 11th plan registered erratic and fluctuating industrial growth. The first year of the plan recorded high industrial growth rate of 15.5%, which fell to just 2.5% in 2008-9. Further rose to 5.3% in 2009-10, and it reached to 8.2% in 2010-11. In the terminal year of 11th plan, the growth rate was 2.8%. There was no consistency regarding the growth rate recorded by the industrial sector after implementing the provisions of the 1991 industrial policy resolution. There were ups and downs, fluctuations with respect to the industrial growth. Another important disadvantage, distortions in production structure. The growth of capital goods industries will act as catalysts in the development process. In fact, the growth of capital goods industries in the post-reform period was less than the pre-reform period, that is prior to 1991. In 2011-12, capital goods industries recorded negative growth rate of the order of 4.1%. The threat of foreign competition. After 1991, Indian business firms have been facing competition from multinational corporations, MNCs. In reality, there is no level playing ground for Indian business firms to compete with MNCs. As a result of opening up of the economy to foreign firms, the nature of competition in the economy is such that where the small domestic firms have to compete with giant MNCs in the same line of production. It is like competition between mighty elephant and small mouse. In due course of time, the mighty elephant may crush the small mouse under its feet. Danger of business colonization. Various concessions provided to the participation of foreign investment and technology in 1991 industrial policy has provided opportunities to MNCs to penetrate their presence in the Indian economy. In the guise of joint venture, MNCs step into the Indian economy and later they set up parallel 100% subsidiaries and bring in new technology into the subsidiary and make the joint venture operationally inefficient. Over time, the joint venture will disappear and only the fully owned foreign company will show its existence. Misplaced faith in foreign investment. Through changes in industrial policy, it was expected that the foreign investment help us to upgrade technology in industrial sector and push up export earnings. But in reality, this expectation remained as a myth. In summary, the wave of economic liberalization started from the mid-80s. The government started reversing its priorities slowly but steadily in the name of new economic policy. The emphasis of economic policy shifted from public to private sector. Government assigned greater importance to private sector in economic activity. Government changed the direction of its economic policy from socialist nature to market orientation. These fundamental changes in the economic philosophy of the government over time, such as free the Indian industrial economy from license permit Raj, integration of Indian economy with world economies, reducing the financial burden on government exchequer, relaxing the rules and regulations of FERA, removing the stringent provisions in MRTP Act. In line with the expected changes in economic policy, government in 1991 announced new industrial policy. The new industrial policy 1991 initiated measures such as delicensing, deregulation, reducing the role of public sector and removal of mandatory convertibility clause of industrial loans. Though the changes in 1991 industrial policy attracted foreign investment, but at the same time these changes laid foundations for unequal competition between domestic and MNCs in the Indian economy. Self-assessment questions. 1. Spell out the meaning of delicensing. 2. In which year MRTP Act came into being? 3. What is deregulation? 4. How many industries were reserved for public sector in the year 2011? References. 1. Mishra and Puri, Indian Economy, Himalaya Publishing House, New Delhi. 2. Dutt and Sundaram, Indian Economy, Chand and Company. 3. Piyanthar, Indian Economy, Its Growing Dimensions, Kalyani Publishers.